Welcome to Spiraling Soul, a podcast where we merge spirituality and psychology. I'm Emma, and that's Casey, and congrats on beginning the spiral. Today, we are going to be talking about attachment styles and the anxious avoidant trap. Casey is going to be leading a lot of this episode. We actually read this book that we're referencing a lot. It's called Attached: The New Science of Adult Attachment and How It Can Help You Find and Keep Love by Amir, Levine, MD, and Rachel S.F. Keller, MA. We read this a year ago, and now we're kind of readdressing it. So, yeah, let's get into it.
I've been thinking a lot about attachment. That's why we're coming back to it, because I've had to brush up on this because I have a fearful avoidant attachment style and we want to get that secure. So there are 4 types of attachment styles. There's secure and then insecure attachments. The insecure attachment styles are anxious and avoidant, and there's 2 types of avoidance. There's dismissive avoidant and then fearful avoidant, which is also called anxious avoidant or disorganized, but we'll just call it fearful avoidant for this episode. And you can figure out your attachment styles by either like listening to what we're saying and trying to figure out which one you land in, reading a book, doing research online, or you can take a quiz and we will link that below. So, where do attachment styles come from? Do you know kind of where they come from, Emma?
I'll need refreshers on what the book says, but I also have my guesses. Just from my psychology background, come from aspects of your childhood and like the way your parents raised you and the relationship you had with your parents growing up, or what you saw in them and learned behavior through them as well. But if there were any other like things that the book said, I definitely need a refresher.
Yeah, that's right on point. We get it from our childhood. If you had parents that you couldn't really rely on, or they couldn't really meet your needs, or they weren't emotionally available, you develop an insecure attachment style. Just because you have an insecure attachment style doesn't mean that you're always going to have an insecure attachment style. There are ways to get to a more secure attachment style. And attachment styles, if we go like way back in the day when we were like hunters and gatherers for survival in different areas, that's how our attachment styles develop. So when you have a secure attachment style, you needed to depend on other people in order to survive. And so that gave you more of like a secure attachment. Whereas there were areas where you were just in a very hostile environment and maybe people were dying left and right and you couldn't rely much on others. So for survival, you needed to really rely on yourself. And so that could give you an avoidant attachment style. Like, I'm not going to get close to people because they're just going to die on me anyways and I can't rely on them. So that's where they come from. Before we get into the insecure attachment styles, let's talk about what a secure attachment style is. A secure attachment in relationship, you have low anxiety and low avoidance to intimacy and closeness. So you're comfortable with being close with other people. You're comfortable with intimacy. People in this type of relationship, they're very consistent and they're reliable. They see their partner's happiness and well-being as a priority and something that is their responsibility. Like, yes, your partner's happiness like isn't solely responsible on you, but you care about it and you want to like help them. Do you have something to say? So when they see that their partner is upset or distressed about something that maybe they did instead of like dismissing it, they want to understand, they want to solve it, they want to reestablish that closeness. And they can pick up on how the other person is feeling. So, like, if someone is off, they're like, hey, like, I can tell that you're off a little bit. Like, do you want to talk about it? But they don't take it personally if their partner is off. They're stable, they're comfortable with commitment, they want to be there for their partner. So that's like the secure attachment. Do you have anything to add?
Not too much else. I think this is the point that everyone strives to be. And yeah, I just wanted to reiterate it is possible to get to a secure attachment if you feel like you don't have a secure attachment. Don't fret. You can get there. It takes work, but you can get there. I feel like I am secure. Do you remember what I got on that quiz last year? Because I don't remember what I think I got secure. And because I remember I was surprised about it.
I think you were anxious before and then you moved to secure.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I was definitely anxious attachment in the past, or even disorganized attachment. But as of last year, I was scoring as a secure attachment. Yeah. Later, we could give you all some tips, or I can at least explain how I got to that point in a little bit.
So she is our success story and proof that it is possible. Our first type of insecure attachment is anxious. They want closeness and intimacy in their relationships, but it also kind of scares them. They have a core wound of a fear of abandonment and fear of rejection. So they may feel secure, but then maybe their partner does something that triggers them and makes them feel rejected or abandoned a little bit. They will have activating strategies that they subconsciously implement to try to reestablish connection and closeness. Mainly, that's in order for them to get reassurance and for them to feel loved again and to make sure that their partner isn't going to leave them and that they need to know where the relationship stands. When it's activated, when that attachment is activated, they sit there and ruminate. That's all they can think about is like, how can I get my partner to not leave me? How can I get close to them again? And so they have really high anxiety in relationships and pretty like low avoidance to trying to resolve it. Once they become anxious, they have a hard time expressing their needs in saying what they need, and it gives them a lot of anxiety to address it because they're scared that if I am vulnerable, if I do open up, my partner isn't going to be receptive of it and they're going to reject me and then I'm going to feel hurt. Usually when they address it, they'll result in like some kind of protest behavior. So maybe they don't effectively communicate their need, but they will have a protest behavior like to reestablish contact with their partner and to get their attention. So usually it comes off as like an emotional outburst. Hi, we had some technical difficulties, so a few minutes of what Emma said got cut off. I'm currently editing this, so I'm just going to paraphrase what she said because if I don't, it's not going to make sense. Emma gave a good example of what can happen if an anxiously attached person is triggered. So let's say their partner doesn't respond to them for a handful of hours and they will immediately jump to the worst case scenario. They'll start thinking like, this person must be cheating on me, they don't love me anymore. And so they may respond in some behaviors like calling their partner a bunch, and if they don't hear back, they may completely resort to like thinking that they're going to get broken up with. And until that is resolved, they're going to feel very anxious. And I forgot to add this, but A lot of the times, anxiously attached partners will go above and beyond to prove to the person that they are with that they're valuable. So maybe they will cook and clean and do all of this stuff for their partners in order to get that love. And they thought that they had to earn love, they had to do things to get love. And so they'll do a lot for their partners, especially when they think that their partner is pulling away from them. That's my 2 cents. I'm going to get back into the previously recorded episode. Yeah, that was really well said. Usually there's a sign of a threat and it will kind of activate their attachment system, and they will start seeking their partner's presence, like their emotional presence, their emotional connection. And if the partner isn't available to respond or doesn't respond kind of in a way that makes them feel safe and connected, that's when they enter the danger zone. They begin to get into stress and they begin ruminating and they fear like this is about to end. When they enter the danger zone and it's not resolved, they will start being so aware of everything with their partner, and they will take every little thing as a sign of rejection or abandonment. If it's not resolved, maybe their partner, they come home and they're not as happy to see them, or they're not talking as much, and maybe it has nothing to do with them. Maybe they're just stressed from work, but the anxious partner will just assume like this is about me, this is about me. Usually they'll try to reestablish the connection, but usually not in the best way. And so and then that makes them start disconnecting like kind of from their partner more, like feeling like there's not an attachment, like not a close attachment like with them. It's threatened. So I've had friends with this attachment style, if their partner hasn't called them for a few hours and they already feel like something's off. I've had friends call me in like tears, shaking, like they're gonna break up with me, this is it, they're cheating on me. Like, it's not a fun attachment style to have, and it's not very healthy, and I think it is a lot on some partners. So really the best type of person for an anxiously attached person to be with is someone with a secure attachment style, who, when they do see that their partner is becoming highly anxious, they will try their best to resolve that and give them reassurance.
Yeah, and communicate effectively. I feel like a lot of attachment issues really come down to communicating effectively. Um, because, for example, that like your partner comes home, they're disconnected, and you think something is instantly wrong, and it's all because of you as an anxiously attached person. But if there's effective communication, like they come home and they're like, hey, I'm so sorry, I had a stressful day at work and I'd really prefer to spend a bit of time by myself. Nothing that you did was wrong. I'm just feeling like I need some alone time right now. That communication is instantly going to put someone at ease. Like, okay, it's not me. It's not on me. It's something external, something in their life. Yeah. And so that's why if you're anxiously attached, you should definitely be with a secure, try and find a secure person, because I think that will honestly help heal your anxious attachment. I feel like that's kind of my situation. I used to be very anxiously attached, and then I've just gotten to this point of being with somebody that does give me that consistent communication, and now I don't question anything at all. Like I'm very investigative. Like if something seems off, I don't assume it's about me anymore. I think more like, hey, what's up? Like, is there something bothering you? And we're about to get into talking about avoidance. And you're going to find out anxious people tend to gravitate towards avoidant people because there's this push and pull, which we'll give a little more info about that. And yeah, so that's why as an anxious person, you might find that you end up more with avoidant people, which isn't going to do you any good. So just going to say it now. If you can find a secure attachment person, that's best case scenario.
Yes. Yes. And to touch on that, a lot of the dating advice that people are given is to attract avoidant people. The games that they tell you to play, like, don't text them right away. You need to wait a few hours to text them, or you're going to scare them off, or you shouldn't tell them how you feel about them. That's a lot of dating advice, and it's to attract avoidance, because avoidance are the ones that are primarily still out in the dating pool. A lot of securely attached people are the ones that they're out there dating. Maybe they're in relationships, maybe they're married. There's a lot of avoidance in the dating pool because they're the ones that are avoiding connection and usually ending relationships.
Yeah, like almost stringing people along. Another reason that I understand why a lot of dating advice is centered around anxious avoidant people is because dating is like a chase, and dating is supposed to be exciting, and anxious avoidant relationships are exciting, feel exciting because it's like a roller coaster, because you'll have some days that you'll both be on top of the world, super in love with each other, like very connected, and then it kind of falls apart, and there's again the push and pull, the anxious pulls keeps pulling, the avoidance starts pushing away, and then the cycle keeps continuing on, and it feels exciting, but it's actually just chaotic and messy. Secure relationships can feel boring, especially if you're more used to that push and pull and chase and not knowing exactly where everyone in the relationship stands. Like it feels exciting, and that's why people can gravitate towards that, because secure relationships can feel boring at times. You don't have that activation all the time.
And that's the anxious avoidant trap that we'll talk more about later, but it's literally an addiction. It's giving you addiction, the chemicals of addiction in your brain, and that is why it's so hard to leave those type of relationships. We'll explain more of later after we get into the avoidance of like why that push and pull is so addictive. Next are the avoidance. There's two types of avoidance, the fearful avoidant and the dismissive avoidant. First, we'll start with the dismissive avoidant. Dismissive avoidants really pride themselves on self-sufficiency and being independent. And this was probably because when they were a kid, they could not rely on their caregivers. They learned that they just can't rely on other people. They see depending on others and needing others as a weakness. So if their partners depend on them and need them, they don't understand it because they do pride them so much on being self-reliant. They want to maintain distance in a relationship. Being vulnerable, being close is a fear to them. Like they're scared of that, and it threatens their sense of independence because they're like, oh, well, if this person needs me, if this person relies on me, then I'm not as independent. And they should be independent. Whereas we know in secure relationships, you depend on each other. Dependence is okay. Like You can't do everything alone. And it actually, statistically, avoidants are less happy and fulfilled in relationships because they don't have that connection. They don't have that vulnerability. They don't feel like they can depend on other people. And a lot of this is because they repress their own emotions. They don't understand their emotions. If other people are maybe having emotional reactions in the relationship, they do not know how to handle it. And they will implement deactivating strategies. And these really just squash intimacy. They want intimacy, they want closeness, but they're really scared of it. And to go back, like, if you were dating someone with an avoidant attachment, it doesn't mean that they've never given you intimacy or closeness. A lot of the times when you start dating an avoidant person, they will be very romantic. They will take you on dates. They'll sweep you off your feet. You will feel very close and very connected with them. And this is in the honeymoon stage. But as soon as things get a little bit too serious for them, as soon as they realize like you are relying on them and you want them to show up and be there for you, they could disconnect. There's a wall that goes up. And I've experienced this before, and it's literally like you look in, they won't make eye contact with you. You look in their eyes, and it's like they're not even there anymore. It's like, I don't know. It for me, it's like your soul is gone. Like we're not, something's missing. Like, where did you go? Like, where are you? So once things get a little too close, little too serious, it scares them, and they start to have these deactivating strategies to kind of push their partner away. One of these will be them feeling like, oh, well, I'm not ready to commit. I can't commit because of X, Y, and Z. This person relies on me and I can't be relied upon. They may start to pick apart their partner and find little imperfections and little things that they don't like about them in order to push them away and disconnect that intimacy. And this could be like they have this idea of the perfect relationship and the perfect person. And if you don't meet these ideas of it, like once you get past the honeymoon stage and the rose colored glasses come off, that's when they'll start like picking you apart. And a lot of them will have this like phantom ex, an ex that maybe they still are in love with and are like, oh, well, it could have worked out. And they really believe maybe if they get back with this person that it will work out because they'll put their person on a pedestal. And when they're not meeting all of these expectations and they actually start to see them as a real person with real human emotions and real needs and wanting their person to continuously show up for them, that's when they kind of pull the pedestal out from under them and they're like, oh, this is too much for me. Like if things are just going way too well, they really start to just mentally and emotionally check out of the relationship and keep their partners at arm's length because they're scared. And that's their core wound, is like fear of losing their independence. Like they have very low anxiety in relationships and very high avoidance. If you try to bring up like, hey, I've noticed that you've been distant, they will completely deny it. They will make up excuses. And that could be that they don't even know that they're doing it themselves because they don't like looking at emotions. They're very avoidant in trying to solve conflict. They don't like conflict. It annoys them when conflict comes up. the people who are mainly reading these attachment style books, the people who are doing the research on attachment, it is very, very few avoidants because they are avoiding it. They are just fine with keeping people at arm's length. What were you going to say?
Yeah. Oh, I was gonna say, I'm glad you mentioned that because as you were talking, I'm thinking, I feel like when we were talking about the anxious, we were talking like, you do this, you do that. And then when we're talking about the avoidance, we're like, they do that to you. And I was like,
Yes.
oh, interesting that we like made that flip. And I think it's because A, we lean more anxious, both of us, but B, the people that are more interested in these things are the anxious because anxious people, I feel like, care so much. Like they care and they want to do better. And I'm not saying avoidant people don't care, but it's like they don't even really tend to acknowledge the issue as much, at least from what I've noticed, because they are very much focused on themselves, which again, you can be focused on yourself, but there's definitely a balance. And I feel like or avoidant people also tend to be the ones that when you break up, you won't hear from them for a while, and then they'll slide back into your DMs like several months later and be like, I miss you. I'm so sorry. Take me back. And whereas the anxious, I feel like after a breakup, they'll be trying to rekindle it or like be reaching out and getting ghosted and blocked and stuff. And then they finally heal, move on, and then that's when the avoidants reach back out.
In the research, that's literally the avoidance. Once the relationship ends, they get this sense of relief like, oh, thank God I don't have to worry about that anymore. I'm so happy I'm free again. But then it repeats this cycle of, oh no, I'm actually feeling kind of lonely. Oh, I actually really liked this thing about my partner. They start to see the good things in the relationship and then they come back. Whereas the anxious, they only really see the positives in their partner and the relationship, and they put it on a pedestal, and it takes them a while to see like, oh, maybe this relationship wasn't as good as I thought. Yeah, that's a good point. Lastly, we have the fearful avoidant, also known as anxious avoidant, also known as disorganized. This attachment style, they have very high anxiety in relationships and very high avoidance. They are a mixture between the dismissive avoidant and the anxiously attached.
Best of both worlds.
Yeah, this is what I have, which I thought was just my Gemini placements, but no, it's this attachment style. So they have their core wounds are they fear losing their independence, but they also fear being abandoned and they also fear being rejected. So usually if a fearful avoidant is with a dismissive avoidant, they will lean anxious. And maybe they'll like avoid the problem like an avoidant would, but then their anxiety will get way too much. They'll finally kind of do a blow up to rekindle the closeness and rekindle the intimacy. Or if they're dating someone who leans more anxious and is pursuing and trying to get them to be close to them, they'll lean more avoidant. And it just kind of flip flops depending on,
The other person.
yeah, it flip flops depending on the other person.
Yeah, that one's kind of the most tragic. And I feel like I've typically leaned anxious, but I do also see some avoidant tendencies within myself sometimes. And I think this attachment style comes the most from like your childhood and not getting needs met and things like that.
It's like your caregivers, like you need them to survive, but you never knew what you were going to get with them. So, like, if you needed a need met and maybe you expressed it, you never knew if it was going to be a positive response and you were going to get that need met, or if it was going to be a negative response and you were rejected and abandoned. You never knew which one you were going to get. I know, like, personally with me, of like being with avoidance, I would be very scared to address situations and bring up something that might possibly cause a conflict, because I was like, I don't know if this person is going to respond in the way that I need them to, or if they're going to reject me. And I definitely lean more anxious with this, but I feel like I have a lot of resentment toward avoidant people, and I have really villainized them in my head, even though I also kind of lean avoidant. But it all comes down to every insecure attachment style. We're all just wounded and we're all kind of scared of people. We're all kind of scared of trusting people. And we think if people get too close to us, they will ultimately hurt us. And we can't rely on them. It's just very sad. I just find every insecure attachment just sad, and we're all in the same boat, and we are all hurting, and we're all confused, and we just have different ways of going about handling that and protecting ourselves.
Yeah, like any mental health struggle, the first step is always just acknowledging it. Like, okay, I think I have a problem with the way I handle things in relationships. Did you want to talk about the avoidant trap first, or I can talk about strategies on healing?
Let's do the trap. Do you want to start? Do you want to kind of touch on the trap?
So, going back to what we kind of talked about before about the push and pull between anxious and avoidant, that's called the anxious avoidant trap. These two types of people tend to attract one another just because of their tendencies. They work really well together in a way because, yeah, like this excitement, this push and pull, the more the anxious person clings on, the more the avoidant pulls away, and it just feeds into how their brain already works, if that makes sense.
Yeah, they really trigger each other's wounds over and over again.
And the thing that you're supposed to not do is date if you're anxious and avoidant. That's just a recipe for disaster and is not helping anybody, which is so contradictory because those types of people attract each other. And those are the types of people that are more frequently dating. I'm not saying if you're dating or on dating apps, you have this attachment style, but we all know those people that you see on Tinder again and again and again that are dating over and over. This type of love and relationship can also be mistaken as passion because you're like so invested, like I want to feel closer to this person, and so this chase, this attachment I have to them just feels so passionate and fiery, which I think a lot of us is how love we were demonstrated that love should be, is like this elevated feeling. But again, the reality is secure relationships, of course, they have passion and fun and energy, but most of the time they're going to make you feel calm and comfortable and secure and not trigger you as much as these relationships do. Honestly, you shouldn't be dating an avoidant if you're anxious because you crave this intimacy and closeness, but they want to keep their distance. As an anxious person, are really, really hyper vigilant and sensitive to every micro expressions, feeling the energy, feeling off sometimes. Whereas they just always are tending to give out mixed signals, which makes it hard to interpret. Anxious people can also find it hard to communicate effectively of like what's bothering you, and using the protest behaviors that Casey talked about instead. And then avoidants tend to be not very good at reading those protest behavior cues and then not really understanding what is meant by that. Anxious people want to be reassured constantly, whereas avoidant people don't do that. They just put more distance in between the two of you. Anxious people want to know where their relationship's at, and avoidant people don't know. They want to just keep things very, they don't want to fully commit and fully let their partner know exactly where they stand. So it's just a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, like you both want different things, you both respond in different ways. And if you think about it, it's almost like if you're avoidant, you're like, oh, I really just need some alone time. I really just need some space. But they don't say that. And then the anxious person is like, oh no, they're pulling away from me. How long is this gonna last? Are they always gonna be distant from me? And so they're like sitting there like, reassure me, reassure me, reassure me. And then the avoidant is like, dude, bro, I need space. Like, why is she not giving me space? And so it really just it triggers it over and over again. The way that the anxious people usually bring up the situation, is with protest behaviors. It's almost accusatory. Maybe they go off with an emotional outburst when they are confronting it, and it comes off as an attack to the avoidant. And so the avoidant doesn't really see it as this person is trying to resolve the problem. They're starting a problem with me, and I'm going to dismiss it. And they don't like the emotional side of it. So it really just puts up a bigger wall. And what usually happens is like the anxious, they bring it up, it doesn't get resolved because the avoidant is trying to avoid the conflict. They don't resolve it. And so then the avoidant stays, or the anxious stays in this danger zone, and they stay looking for all of these ways that the avoidant is not meeting their needs and isn't giving them what they need. And so then they continue to do these behaviors. They continue to address like, dude, why aren't you showing up for me? I need more from you. And so then the avoidant is like, why can't I do anything right? I can't do anything right. Nothing I do is going to be good enough for this person. When in reality, if the avoidant just like didn't get so defensive about it, or even if the anxious maybe communicated it in less of a accusatory way, but even if I really think even if the anxious did it in a way that was healthy, the avoidant would still be pushing back to it. And they don't want to find ways to resolve it because that threatens their independence. Because if they have to change how they're living and how they're behaving, then they're not independent and can't do what they want anymore. So it really is like nothing's getting resolved. And then the anxious is like, oh, but I know that the avoidant can treat me how I should be treated because they have treated me this way in the past. I know that they can do this. But unfortunately, like, unless the avoidant wants to change, which typically they don't even see that they have a problem, it's just going to be in this trap of push, pull, maybe break up, get back together, on again, off again. And it's just not good. And unfortunately, the anxious is so scared of that abandonment that it's so hard for them to leave, and they will stay in this super toxic relationship until they finally have the courage to leave. And I know Emma has seen this with me multiple times. And do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it really is a trap. And as you were talking, I was just kind of thinking, like I was saying that anxious people should try and find a secure person to be with and soothe their worries. But I feel like secure people honestly wouldn't even get far with an avoidant because avoidance will be pushing away, and then secure people would be like, well, I deserve better than that, and cut it off. Yeah, not saying if you're avoidant, you can never find secure love, but you have to be more aware. And yeah, a lot of these avoidant people aren't that self aware. Yeah, I've definitely seen situations with you and other people, and even within myself at times, of noticing this behavior of like breaking up, getting back together, not fully letting them go, and then a partner being inconsistent, giving you the world one day, and then all of a sudden shutting down out of nowhere. It's stressful. It's stressful to not get that consistent love and affection from somebody. Some people go through things and they might not be able to show up as consistently, but I think the difference with secure people is they will let you know that something is going on. Like, for example, they're having a really stressful time at work and they're like, hey, I'm so sorry. I can't show up like I normally do this week. And then the other secure person in the relationship would give them that time and space, understand that they're going through it, and like maybe even take into consideration their needs and like help them make dinner, like make them dinner that week, or give them little favors and stuff like that. I think a lot of it just comes down to truly being committed to understanding your partner and their needs and how they act and how they behave and how they go through this world. Again, I swing more anxious, but I think my avoidance really comes up when I'm going through something and it's not personal to anybody else. It's just genuinely like I need space to process things on my own. And it takes me a clear, conscious effort to let people know of that. And then it puts the people in my life at ease. Like, okay, I understand that's what's going on. And like my partner, for example, because I just got laid off, we talked about it last week. And so I was feeling disconnected, and my partner like understood that, gave me some space and time, and also made sure to pick up some ice cream for me on the way home from work because he knows that that would have made my day.
Aw. And you brought up a good point about a lot of avoidance when they are feeling overwhelmed. And because they suppress emotions, they tend to just shut off and disconnect because they are so overwhelmed and don't know what to do about that. So they'll just kind of dissociate and disconnect. And then that disconnection from themselves disconnects them from their partner as well.
Yeah, and then anxious people, I feel like, tend to, if they're going through something, they need a lot of support. Like they need people to really be there for them. So that's how it differs. And then if they're with an avoidant person, the avoidant probably can't give them that emotional space. And then it just snowballs. Should we segue into some ways on how to heal, even though healing is a journey and none of us are 100% perfect? And I feel like a lot of people actually aren't 100% secure. I think everybody has tendencies for being anxious or avoidant. But there are ways to get to a secure spot.
I think that's a good step.
So I'll say a couple things that have helped me, and then you can also add after that. I think the first thing, and I feel like if you're listening to this, you're already on step one, so good for you, is just to acknowledge the issue. Like, acknowledge that you do have some of these tendencies. You know, maybe you've experienced multiple relationships in a row that felt chaotic and toxic, and you're trying to figure this out for yourself and how to get better. So, acknowledging the issue is the first step. That happened with me for sure. So, I got out of a relationship, I dated around a little bit, and I literally every single person I went on a date on, I started, thinking like, oh my gosh, this is it. Like, we're going to be in a relationship. And then these people majority of them are avoidant. I'd say almost all of them are avoidant, would like ghost me or not communicate with me. And it would really stress me out. And again, everyone has something different, but honestly, what worked for me is literally deleting all my dating apps, not talking to a single person romantically for over half a year. It's not for the weak. It's not for the weak. So if you can do this, shout out to you. It was hard, but I completely didn't talk to a single person romantically for a long time. After that period, when I felt like I was finally ready, I'd worked on myself a lot, spent a lot of time with myself, developed a lot of self love and respect, and realized my boundaries and what I'm actually looking for. I went back out into the dating world, started dating again. And then if I went on a date with someone and felt like it wasn't going to be a match, I didn't stress out about it. I didn't start ruminating already. I was just like, okay, this isn't going to work. And then that was it. And then the next thing that's helped me for sure is being with a secure person, because I get that constant reassurance and I didn't have to feel like I was guessing with his emotions for me. Like he'll just tell me straight up how he feels. And it's a conscious effort too, because I feel like he has been more avoidant at times and I am more anxious at times, but we have committed to make an effort to communicate effectively. And we've gotten really good at it. Like if something's bothering one of us, the time it takes for us to address the issue is just like shorter and shorter. Like if we have an issue, like in the past, if there's an issue, it would just ruminate inside me for weeks and then I would blow up or something. And now it's like if there's an issue right away, I maybe process it a little bit on my own and then I bring it forward. I'm like, hey, here's the issue. We both bring our sides to the table, understand what each other are saying, apologize. And then honestly, and this is a thing that anxious people really want, is this connection and intimacy. There's nothing more intimate and connecting than resolving an issue. Like I swear that's where the most growth in relationships has come from, is resolving these things effectively. My final piece of advice would be go to therapy. A therapist can really help you work through a lot of that.
Agreed with that. The past 2 EMDR therapy sessions I've had have been really working around this fearful, avoidant, and just lack of trust and all this stuff. And it has really helped. And I think mainly having a more secure attachment is developing that self-love, knowing your self-worth. Again, like Emma said, knowing what you want and being able to identify the type of people who are not going to help you get to that type of relationship that you want, and identifying it early on. I think a lot of us will tend to put people on a pedestal when we first meet them and ignore red flags or ignore the love bombing, and then we get attached to them before we even really know what their attachment style is. And as an anxious person, if you do end up with an avoidant and you're in it for a little too long and then you find out that they're like this, that is when it's so much harder to leave. So just identifying like early on, this person isn't the type of person I want to be with, and being okay with ending it. And also knowing that just because someone doesn't like you, or maybe someone doesn't want to put in that effort with you, has nothing to do with your self-worth. It doesn't mean that you're not a good partner or a cool person. I think that's the biggest thing for me, is like when I would notice that this person wasn't putting in effort anymore, I took it very personally, and I took it very much as like my self-worth would plummet because this person wasn't going to work to keep me in their lives. So that is a big one. Also, it's in this book, when you start dating, you should ideally be dating multiple people at the same time. Because if you're only dating one person, that's where all your focus is on. But if you're dating multiple people, you know that there's other options out there. You don't have all your eggs in one basket, and you're more likely to be like, okay, well, this person isn't for me. I'm going to just move on and put my attention into these other people.
Something that was an anxious tendency for me when I was dating was like, oh, are they gonna like me? Do they like me? You have to reframe it to, do I even like them? Because before I had like healed and stuff, I was always like, oh, I want this person to like me, and I would try my best to make them like me. And then now that I reflect back, I'm like, I didn't even really vibe with them. Why was I
Yeah.
so concerned about them liking me when I didn't
Yeah.
even like them back? And then I ruminated for weeks about them.
Yeah. It's good to write down what you want in a partner and how you want to be treated so that you can review that over and over again in the dating, like while you're dating, to reaffirm to yourself, like, this is how I want to be treated. This is what makes me feel respected. This is what I want. And so when you start to see signs of disrespect, you'll respect yourself enough to leave and not put up with it. Because at the end of the day, it's not the other person's fault. Like, yes, you expect people to treat you with respect, but at the end of the day, it's your fault for putting up with the disrespect. Like, it's on you for continuing it. And we're not to be like, it's your fault people disrespect you, but you're at the end of the day allowing the disrespect.
Yeah, like you don't have to put up with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People can treat you however they want, and they can have their boundaries as of what they're willing to do in a relationship and how far they're willing to go and how far they're willing to open up. And just because you think there's a right way doesn't mean your way is right. It is just right for you. If you're sitting there really begging someone over and over again to change, it's kind of like disrespectful for the other person too, because you're like, yeah, you're not good enough, when really, like, you just aren't compatible, and it's okay, you're not compatible. Move on. And I know it's so, like, it is so much easier to say it than to do it. Like, trust me, Emma has literally sat with me for months at times with the same problem, being like, Casey, just break up with them. Like, what are you doing? Like, break up with them. And I'm like, no, I can't though. You don't know them like me. They're actually a good person. You're like, dude, you jumped out of their car during an argument. Like, no, they're not for you. Like,
Yeah. I just want to say, from a friend perspective, if you notice your friend is in this anxious avoidant trap, and I actually listened to this TikToker who's an expert in friendships. She made a video on this exact topic, and I watched it because I was thinking, we can cut this out, but I was thinking of your recent relationship because I was like, I don't know how else to tell her to just be done. But she says, like, of course, give them understanding, listen at first, maybe help them come up with their own conclusion. But if they continuously are repeating this over and over, it's okay to tell them straight up what you're seeing. Like, hey, this person isn't filling you up. They're never bringing you joy anymore. It's just stressing you out. So don't be afraid to voice your concerns. And it's really up to the person to make the choice, but like, you gotta look out for your friends. Oh, I remembered the other thing I was gonna say. It's on the topic of what you were talking about before, about realizing your worth. I'm gonna need all of you listening to get real and decide that you're actually icked out by avoidant behavior. Like, it's not just, oh, I want to be treated well, which is important. No, you gotta say this affirmation every day. I find it gross when people don't give me the love and validation that I deserve. Like, completely reframe it. Oh, no, they're just being, they're just like that. No, it's gross to you. Done.
Yeah. That's so funny. That's so funny you say that because my coworker literally sent me a meme with a frog on it a couple days ago. It was like, he's gross, bestie. I'll have to send it to you and maybe we can put it on our Instagram for this episode.
Yeah.
So that's the end of today's episode. I hope it opens some people's eyes. Hopefully, you're going to break up with your partner who isn't treating you right. And we will have this book, the attached book, linked in the description. It is actually very eye opening. It can be kind of a lot at times. It can make you very emotional at times because you start to realize kind of all the disrespect that you've kind of allowed to happen in your life and maybe where you went wrong in the relationship. So it can be kind of a lot, but we'll have it linked below. I highly, highly recommend reading it. I will also link a couple of websites and YouTubers that I have been watching lately to hopefully get a more secure attachment style. And we will also link the quiz so that you can figure out what your attachment style is. Yeah, thanks for listening. We will see you the Tuesday after next. You can follow us on social media. It will also be linked in the description below. Peace out.